Hi guys, in this video I'm going to be replacing the starter motor in my 1988 Porsche 911. And if you are watching this video, you probably know that in 1987 Porsche changed the gearbox on this car, which actually greatly complicates the replacement of the starter motor, because the new gearbox, the G50 gearbox, it's actually much larger than the previous unit. There's less space in the transmission tunnel to access the mounting bolts for the starter. And so if you have a 1987, 88, and 89 air-cooled 911, to replace the starter motor, you have to actually lower the gearbox 5 or 6 inches. Whereas in the earlier cars, pre-1987, it's like any other car. You just can remove the starter from underneath the car. So that's what I'm going to be doing in this video. I'm going to show you how to do that. It's actually, it sounds rather daunting that you're doing basically a partial engine drop to replace the starter motor, which is, in a typical car, a fairly straightforward bolt-on, bolt-off operation. But as we'll see, it's actually, I'm recording this actually after I've done the job, and it's actually fairly straightforward. It's you follow the steps, and it's not that difficult. Okay, replacing the starter in my 88 911. The steps: first of all, disconnect the negative terminal of the battery. We have done that. Raise vehicle to gain access to the bottom of the engine. I've done that. This is the easy part. And then what we have to do is we have to lower the gearbox so that we have access to the bolts that secure the starter to the transmission. First step is to disconnect the shift linkage. You have to push back a rubber boot. There's a 13mm hex bolt, and they tell us to loosen that and then pull the shift rod out of shift couple. This is necessary again in order to lower the gearbox. Next, we'll disconnect a stabilizer bar. That seems to be pretty straightforward. And after that, we remove the hoses connecting the heat exchanger, and that actually seems pretty straightforward. I've got the car securely set on jack stands underneath the torsion bars, and so I have to reassure myself that that's not going anywhere. It's not going to fall and crush me to death. Okay, underneath the car. I don't know how much, I'm pretty low here, so I don't know how much perspective I'm going to get from my camera, but here I am. I'm underneath. That's the oil drain plug on the bottom of the crankcase of the engine. Going back. On the right there on your screen is one of the heat exchangers. Going back. There's the shock. Back further. Let's get some light up here. We're underneath the gearbox now. You see the CV joints there. We're going to go back still. Further back. That thing there is the accelerator linkage, and I also have to disconnect that. Yeah, okay, so here we have that stabilizer bar is now what you see there. That's going to have to be removed. I'm going to go further back. At the end of this process, we're still going back. You see there are 2 bolts. There's the driver's side bolt, and then on the other side here, over across my face, is right ahead of me. That's another transmission bolt. And what we're going to do is we're going to remove a bunch of stuff so that the transmission can fall freely without, snapping any cables or anything. And then we're going to, first we're going to sort of rest the gearbox on a jack, remove these 2 mounting bolts, and then gradually lower the jack 4 to 6 inches. And that should give us enough access to get the bolt for the starter cable. I'm not going to be able to do this but I'll show you. Here's that sort of mounting plate for the gearbox. And here is the shift linkage. There's a rubber boot here, which I've pulled back a little bit. And you see a bolt there. That's a 13mm bolt. You disconnect that, and then that shift rod should slide out. So the first thing to do is to get a combination wrench under there. You got to get that on the nut, loosen it. Okay, folks, here's the shift coupler. Here's my 13mm wrench. I loosened this nut here, and I think what we need to do is, they say push the shift rod out of the coupler. So I think the shift rod will go into the transmission, and this will come out if I loosen this enough. Okay, so I removed it. What you have to do is, no, you don't simply loosen the screw. I tend to be very conservative, and I just thought you just loosen it a little bit and it'll slide out. You really have to remove the bolt that went in there. I just removed it, and then if you can see here, this is disconnected. Now what we move on to is the stabilizer bar, which is here. Apologies for the lack of perspective. You see it there, and there are two bolts. They're both 13mm. There's the first one, and the second one is on the other side. There it is. There's one bolt, second bolt, one's on the other side, 13mm. I won't film that because it should be really easy. Okay, guys, remove the bracket from that stabilizer bar. Here are the two, one hole here, and here's the bracket that I removed. Very straightforward. Then I do the other side, and then hopefully the bar will just lower out. Okay, to remove the stabilizer bar, we remove the brackets up here. Right here, we remove these brackets, and we have to remove this bolt here. That's 19mm, and I'm assuming it's going to be on there pretty strongly, so I'm going to use a breaker bar, and then remove that, and then this bar should all pop out, lower out of the car. Okay, the next step is to disconnect these hoses that go onto the heat exchanger. You see there that screw. That needs to be unloosened, and so we can remove that hose. There we go. Just a regular hose clamp. There, this one's been loosened and removed. So when this drops out, it's not going to bother anyone. All right, and the heat exchanger on the right-hand side of the car. Okay, this one's been loosened, so if this drops, no problem. Okay, guys, getting this lower bolt to remove the stabilizer bar, you see it right there, is actually proving pretty difficult. This is only supposed to have about, I think it's 85 Newton meters of torque on it, 63 foot-pounds, which is, it's less than lug nuts, for example. But I think somebody in the past or whatever, this has been a real bear to remove. And what I've done, the only way I could get it is I put my lug wrench and take a long pipe to give me some leverage, and only then was I able to crack this. So in the it's a simply loosened nut, and sometimes a simple one line on the instructions can involve a lot of sweat and time and aggravation. Okay, guys, I was unable to remove the final bolt from my stabilizer bar. You can see there. I did it on this side. On that side, you can see I was able to remove it, but I was only able to do that because to loosen it, I could put actually about a 4-foot long pipe on the end of a breaker bar, and I could pull up, and that allowed me to break it. On this side, however, to loosen, it involved pushing down, and I just didn't have enough leverage to crack that. That bar drops, and since I'm not removing the whole transmission, I'm dropping it 6 inches. I'm hoping I'll be able to get by with not having removed that. It's not ideal. and it might get in my way. Now the other two things remaining should be fairly simple. The first thing is this: I'm on the driver's side, and you're supposed to remove the throttle cable from the bell housing right there. The bell housing is, here's the transmission, but you see this sort of ball and socket. This has to be popped out, and I think I should be able to just pop that out, and that way it's not going to otherwise it'll damage it. Okay, before I pop this off, I'm going to remove this little clip here, this little wire clip. I'm going to need two hands to do that, but that's going to come off. You see that? Okay, so the ball joint just pops out. What this little clip here does is it goes under here, snaps into here, and that kind of prevents this from popping out on its own on the roadway. So it's a sort of a little check. I think the little flat part is just basically covers the top of the hole here where the ball is on. Anyway, that's easy enough. The final thing is I need to detach the ground strap right here. 13 millimeter nut. Everything is disconnected, actually, and so now what we have to do is we have to crack these bolts, remove them, and the transmission will just fall down. Okay, so here we are under the car. On the side of the car, you see my accelerator linkage disconnected. And then the next step is you support the transmission with the jack. There's my jack. And now what we do is we loosen the two, ultimately we're going to remove the two nuts here. And here I have a sort of a breaker bar with these are 19 millimeters. And I already loosened this actually, and it wasn't quite so bad after dealing with that stabilizer bar. Here I'm doing it with one hand, but it actually moves, so that's gonna be pretty straightforward. Let me just loosen the other side. Okay, and here I'm on the passenger side. You see the dangling ground strap that's been disconnected, and there's my jack, and here's the right hand side bolt. And put on my breaker bar and crack that one. I need two hands for that. Passenger side mount. All right, there's a second one. Okay guys, I'm on the verge of dropping the transmission, or lowering the transmission. As you can see there, I have my have sort of a manual jack on the sort of cross member right here. And just as sort of a backup, I have kind of my jack on the bottom of the plate. And basically what we need to do is we need to drop this between 4 and 6 inches. And I believe 15 centimeters is sort of the maximum. 15 centimeters is about 6 inches. Now, one of the problems that I didn't anticipate is you actually have to jack the car up quite a bit in order to drop that 6 centimeters. And in fact, I found that I hadn't jacked up the car high enough. I always, with the 911, I like to park the jack stands on the mount on the torsion bar. but that's fairly high up. And so if you look at my jack there, let me see if I can zoom out. That's basically at the maximum extension, which I've never used before. Usually I have only one notch, and there I have the maximum extension. And actually with my sort of hydraulic jack there, you know, it's typical sort of garage mechanic, non-professional jack, that's a maximum I can even jack it up from the jack points here, using sort of the lollipop. Like to jack up the car. 911, you have to be careful with jacking it up because there are all these oil lines, and that's why if you bring it to a shop and they're kind of inept, they might actually really damage it. But that's why I put the lollipop in there, put my hydraulic jack under it. But this is at the maximum extension of the jack, and in any case, it's as far up as I want to go on these jack stands. Even that makes me a little nervous, to be honest with you. So, and even with that, I'm only going to be able to drop the transmission about 4 inches. Hopefully that's going to be enough. Supposedly you could even do this job if you have the right tools without dropping the gearbox. And if I've gone this far, I might as well drop it in a way that really helps me. However, if I were to do this again, I might get beefier jack stands, taller jack stands to do this, because it really should be way up in the air. Hopefully I'll be able to do it. As you can see here, where I have this hockey puck, the distance here, where my 2 fingers are, that's about 3.5, 4 inches. So that's I'm going to start, and hopefully that will be enough. This is the jack that I'm going to unloosen. And I can actually probably do this manually as I'm lowering it. That's why I like the manual jack, because the hydraulic jack means that I loosen a screw and then it just sort of drops more quickly if you loosen it too quickly. This one I can really have absolute control over it. And so here I'm turning this with my knob counterclockwise, and the transmission is slowly falling. And you can see there, this is I'm lowering this, and I've already lowered it a little bit, and you can see see am I pointing there, you can see the shaft from the transmission right there where my thumb's pointing, and it's dropped below the shift coupler, the first thing I did. Let me see, get that in focus. So now we're dropping very slowly. You can see that the ground strap sort of dangling there. On the other side you can see the accelerator linkage. So everything seems to be going fine. Doing it very slowly, trying to listen to see if I hear any pops or cracks, which case I would stop. And there it is, and that's something. This is all new for me. Okay, I'm going to stop and reposition my jack. Okay, continuing to loosen. My mechanical jack here is a little unsteady, actually. So if I were to do this again, I would actually arrange it sort of the other way. So the scissors are sort of pointed perpendicular to this crossbar. But I don't, because I have this bar that I wasn't able to remove. But hopefully this will be okay. I'm going to lower it onto this member here, then I'll reposition that jack. There it is. We've come down quite a bit. As I'm crawling sideways underneath the right rear wheel, and I'm looking up at the starter motor. Let's see if we can see up there. I don't know if it's clear in the video, but lowering the transmission has opened up a gap up on the top. You see where the light is sort of shining in, it's casting a shadow. That space is where we're going to find the upper mounting bolt. The lower mounting bolt is clearly in view. It's right there with the sort of brass. And my finger is pointing. That would have been easy to get to in any case. But the reason why we're doing this whole thing is so I can get that upper nut, which in spite of all of the effort so far is still not in view. And hopefully I can get an arm up there and feel it and get some sort of combination of ratchets, swivels, and extensions to turn it. But the first order of business is to disconnect the wires. My eyesight's probably not as good as what's going to appear on your screen, but this is the main cable. And there are, so I'm going to disconnect this, this main cable here. And then there'll be two wires, I believe. There's one is this, this yellow wire that goes into one terminal, and then one that I can't see that will be revealed when this pops off. So let me get this nut, and we'll disconnect these. If you've skipped to this portion of the video, the very first thing I did in this entire project before I did anything else was disconnect the negative terminal on the battery, because these wires, even if the ignition isn't on, one of these wires, I don't know which one, is hot, which means that you can get quite a bad shock if you happen to short out these contacts to ground with either a tool or even a watch or a piece of jewelry. Easy to avoid, just disconnect the terminal on the battery, but I'll mention that now because you definitely don't want to be messing with these if the battery's connected. This bolt here is 13 millimeter. Just turning them one little turn at a time.